Tamara Sibley and Emjoy Gavino. You received their extensive bios, so I don't like to waste time in the meeting doing that. What we're going to talk about, what they're going to talk about is what's the role of a casting director, relationship with casting director and directors, and then we want to move on to the whole concept of, not really a concept, the non-traditional casting and what have you, and some of the things that are involved. Can you see over here? Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. So let's begin with just talking about what is the role of casting directors today in Chicago theater? How much power do they have? We see a show and, oh, who cast that person? Was it the director or the casting director?
Power, that's an interesting term. In my world, a casting director is basically a person that is hired by a theater company, or in my case, I also do film and a little bit of television. And so we are the person that goes out to look for actors, yes. Mm-hmm. We post notice for an actor. We bring in actors that the artistic director or the director or the producer wants to see. So.
The way I like to describe it, I think Adam Belcour, who works for the Goodman, he considers the casting director as part of the design team, because in a way we do help design the show. And like she was saying, we bring people to the director's attention that they might not know of. The theaters that I work with, I sit down with the director, and sometimes if it's a new work, the playwright, and I get specifics about what each character needs to be. What is the absolute given? They absolutely need to be somebody who reads as 20. They absolutely need to be somebody who can do the splits. They absolutely, depending on the role, they need to be able to do certain things. And from that, I try to give them a huge range of people that might fit that specific thing. And then it might be like, if all they need to be is an ingenue, somebody who reads in their 20s for a romantic interest, I might have somebody who is a larger figure, or somebody who is petite, or somebody who is disabled, or somebody who is, because if all they need to be is a young woman, then you might as well show them great instances for each role. And so that was going into the other stuff, but
well, it's hard to not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So to piggyback on that, a good casting director will give you, or give the director, what he or she is asking for, plus what she just said, plus 2 or 3 or 4 different ways to look at the role that you never thought about it before. Mm-hmm. So then because the director may go, oh, that could have been a woman. Oh, that person can be in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. Oh, that person can be, so it's a lot of different ways. Oh, that's a cop, but it could also be, a woman, okay, right. Or, so we help to expand the picture. That's why we're hired, because we have our finger on the pulse, right, of the talent in town, or out of town, or around the world, depending on who you're working on. And it's like, bring me, and then some people are gonna be, bring me a Denzel. Okay. So we gotta, because in LA that's a big thing. Bring me a Denzel type, you know what I mean? So then we have to find that, you know what I mean? But a good casting director may also say, I know this is what you really want, because we're also salesmen and women. We have to pitch the directors, we have to pitch the producers, we have to pitch the actors. There may be some actors that say, I don't want to work at that theater. And then we have to say, well, now wait a minute. Listen, this is a good reason why you should want it. This is a great career move. And let me explain why. And they're hanging on every word that we're saying, because we are casting directors. And there is some, you asked that question before, there is some power in that. And I don't like to abuse that, because I'm once upon a time an actor myself, so I'm what you call, I think we both are, an actor's casting director, which means that we speak the language of actors, which means that we can read with our actors. We don't have to hire someone to read if we don't want to, although we do. We can get into readers later, but I mean, it's just, let me stop.
But it's there's power, but there's also, because we are actors, casting directors, and Cree, who will hopefully be here soon. I would consider him one too. There's also with power the responsibility. We're protecting our actors, we're protecting the director, we're protecting the theater company and the ensemble that is already hired or not yet hired, for a good experience, and you don't want to usher in anybody who might mess that up. Yeah.
But here's the thing, I don't know about you, but I will go ahead and they'll hire everyone, and then I hold my breath. Because they're personalities,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
And so it's great in the audition and everybody's happy, and then the next thing you know, I'm firing this person. I'm like, what? Okay, so, or we've got to change someone, or it's true, you know, I mean, it can work all great in the audition process, and then you just don't know, unless it's an ensemble,
Right.
you know, and sometimes they know what they're getting, because it's like, okay, they're a part of my ensemble.
Right.
But if it's someone new, and the artistic things don't happen, or and when it does, it's like, oh my God, they were great, and then you can get hired again.
Yeah. But it's you do hold your breath, because sometimes it's a gamble when theater companies, especially theater companies with ensembles, they're trusting us to bring new people into their room. And so we're writing our reputation on these actors who we know are talented, but we don't know what they will do in this room. But we believe in them enough to bring them into this fold, and there's that part of that responsibility again.
You mentioned about having the pulse of the theater community, et cetera. Non-traditional casting, whether it's race, ethnicity, gender choice, physical abilities, what are the current trends now? And what do you see in the future?
Can you explain trends?
Well, are we seeing more non-traditional casting now than we have in the past?
There's definitely more. That I moved here 10 years ago, and there's thankfully a lot more than I've seen. I was seeing.
That's what I mean by trend.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, of late, people have been taking classics, and an example is The Matchmaker at the Goodman. Henry Wishcamper did complete non-traditional casting, and it's something that they've been doing with Christmas Carol for a long time, and often people will do it with Shakespeare. It's happening at Straw Dog right now with Cymbeline, and it's happening a lot more with classics, which is great. Godot at Court and Tympanic. So it is happening more. A new, I wouldn't call it a trend, but a new area is representing people of the trans community, and exploring what that means in our city and nationally, because there are also new works, playwrights who are writing these stories specifically for these voices. And so then the question is, how do you talk about this community that we have not had to talk about before, except for maybe once a year in a movie that Felicity Huffman's in, you know, like it's new, it's very new to all of us. But I wouldn't call it a trend. I would just call it something that's just arriving at our radar, and everyone is trying to responsibly grapple with it.
Because non-traditional casting isn't new, you know, but I think there's probably more of it happening now. I had to do a film that dealt with a transgender subject matter, and it was brand new water for me, brand new. I didn't know the language, and you have to be very respectful and aware of what you're saying and who you're talking to, and on top of that, you're trying to do casting a role, and you know, it was quite an experience, you know, and I learned a lot, you know, about what not to say, what to say, how, you know, if people are in the process of the transition, there's a way to speak to who they are before they're in the transition, and then after the transition happens. So, you know, and that's basically what the movie was about, you know, so it was, you know, it's a very sensitive subject, but look at transparent, you know what I mean? That's
which is still controversial because the main character is played by a cisgendered male.
Right.
And so some people do not like that, and some people love it because the stories are coming from the trans community. So it's, and I'll piggyback on that because one of the companies I work for is ATC. Will Davis is the new artistic director there, and is trans, but identifies as male. And so I'm still learning the language. What I will say is that it is personal to every single trans artist. So
Yes.
while he goes by he, there are people who they go by they, and you can't just assume that because they have this name or that name that he will respond to this or that or whatever. So it is really more than any other community, so personal and individual to each artist that we speak with. And so often if the person has an agent, the agent will know what they prefer, but sometimes because we're in a learning period and we can be the people who fall on our swords for the theater companies or the film companies, we just ask, because I think people would rather be asked what they prefer rather than you assume because of their name or because of what they look like or because the other trans person they know goes by this. They even if it's uncomfortable, it's better to ask the question.
It
and
is.
especially when you're so ATC's picnic is going to be really, really different in terms of gender compared to other picnics that you've seen, and the casting process that we went through. We did have to have a conversation with each actor individually of what pronoun they use and how we can make them comfortable. And this might have to happen for the next few years until we figure out a better way to do it.
But the bottom line is, be it trans, be it African American, be it Caucasian, who is the best actor for the part? Do you know what I mean? And that is a thing that we're always looking at, you know, even with whatever the issues are or the parameters are. Who's the best one? You know, who is the best trans actor? Do you know, because that's why they hired us. You know what I mean? It's like, please bring me the cream of the crop. You know, I'm not, you know, okay, it's a trans piece or whatever, but who's the person that we should be looking at in this, you know, and we are the experts. That's how they look at casting directors. That's how actors look at casting directors. Where we go, I mean, I don't know about you, I just try to slide in, you know what I mean? Because if actors know that there's a casting director, I don't know if oh my God, it's
It
a
gets
whole nother,
stressful.
and it's
Yeah.
just like, we're just here,
But
you know,
there-
sitting in
but-
the back there, you know, because people get weird, you know, and they're like, okay, the casting director's here, and I don't want you to be uptight. I want you to just be you, because I don't roll like that. I don't, you know, use that as a power tool. Do you know what I mean?
You're talking about when you go to see people's shows?
Or just in general, you know, there could be actors sitting
Yeah,
right
yeah,
here,
yeah.
you know, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
those are casting directors,
Right.
you know, and I don't, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm the kind of person that's really looking for authenticity. You know what I mean? And I talk to people, and a lot of times, I mean, there's a whole stigma with casting directors. You can't talk to them, you can't touch them, you can't get near them, you know, and it's like, what? You know, because people have also abused that power, you know, so we're trying to demystify, because we're just regular folks, you know, but we are also artists, you know what I mean? Casting is an art. If you don't remember anything else that we say today, you know, seriously, it really is an art. And I don't know how many people have seen the documentary Casting By.
It's great.
About Marion Daugherty and how this whole thing all started, because casting directors were originally glorified secretaries, right? And so, and she and I'm trying to remember the guy from California. Anyway, I can't think of his name right now. They were the spearheaders of
What
all
the
of
job
this.
became.
Yes,
Yeah.
of what it became and what it is, and how we got casting by. You know, that's a big title, you know, and we still don't have a union, and we still don't get an Oscar. We get Emmys now, do you know what I mean? And of course, and I don't know.
Slow moving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, you know,
Yeah.
so,
And I think too, it's, lost my train of thought.
uh-oh.
Maybe it's a good time to talk about the Inclusion Project.
Oh, so I started a nonprofit called the Chicago Inclusion Project because 5 years ago I was just an actor And actors, minority actors, marginalized actors, I should say, would spend hours at bars or dressing rooms just complaining about the state of things and how slow-moving things are in the city, in the world, in our industry. I've played a nurse 7 times on television now, because that's what they do with Asian people. And it's true. And you know, there are so many things to complain about still. I got tired of just complaining about it, but I didn't want to start a theater company because that sounds really hard, and it is. And I wasn't working as a casting person at that time, but what I wanted to do was just show directors and casting people and patrons that, like, it's not that hard. The first show we tackled was Time of Your Life, which is an American classic written by William Saroyan in the 30s, and it is just about a bunch of people in a bar. And you know, what American wouldn't, and it's about the American dream. And as I was reading the play on Christmas Day, I started to hear Behzad Dabu, who is now on How to Get Away with Murder. I heard him as like this young plucky guy who's like really, really funny, has nothing to do with ethnicity, because if you go back and read a lot of these classic scripts, there's nothing in the character description about what they need to look like, basically what the race is, how tall they are, whether or not they walk fast. Like, there's really nothing in the description other than this person is a dreamer, or this person is, you know. So from that, I just cast my favorite actors in town, who happen to be Michael Thornton, who's in a wheelchair, and Anish Jethmalani, who rarely gets to do things like classical pieces and is brilliant at it. And I just cast them in this American thing because I'm kind of a fangirl of all of them, and I just wanted to see them in the show. And we just did a reading, and we invited a lot of people, and I think 150 industry people showed up, and 50 patrons showed up. And this was at VG, and that was supposed to be a one-time thing. And then people started saying, we need to see more of this. And I still didn't want to start a theater company, so we just did another reading at Writers. We did Saint Joan, where Saint Joan was played by Avi Roque, who is a trans Latinx artist, and everyone else was on stage was male identified. And it blew up the text in a way that Writers Theater was really excited about, and now Michael Halberstam wants to put it in one of their seasons. And so, like, I guess I started the Inclusion Project because I was tired of talking about it, and I wanted to show without starting a theater company. So that's
right. But it's giving people opportunities and letting other folks know what the possibilities are with using people who are not the usual suspects.
And we just wanted to show the work, let the work speak for itself, and introduce these theaters to new people, and introduce the patrons to new people, and really great discussions have come out of it. And then since then we've started casting from Inclusion Project, but it started just as a reading. So.
And what is the website?
The ChicagoInclusionProject.org. Yeah.
You know, a couple of times you've mentioned classics. What about contemporary plays? Is there a difference between casting non-traditional roles in classics versus contemporary plays? I mean, you said classics so many times,
yes.
So I'm just wondering.
Well, there's classics,
Yes.
You know, Shakespeare and
Yes,
you know, Moliere
yes.
and all those things, which feel very, Christmas Carol feels very far away from us.
Right.
So in a way, it's almost easier to cast non-traditionally. Matchmaker.
Right.
When you start to get to classic contemporary, you know, Tennessee Williams, and when it starts to get closer to people, that's when it feels a little bit more uncomfortable, I think, and not impossible, but
Uncomfortable for whom?
sometimes the director,
Okay.
and sometimes what the director thinks the audience will receive, and sometimes it's to the benefit, I think. And then there's like true contemporary of like it's written today, but oftentimes those playwrights have specific people in mind. So it just kind of it's a case by case basis. My favorite version of that, and I guess it would be considered a classic, but made it more contemporary, was The Grapes of Wrath at Gift Theater. Tom, Jode, and Ma were African American, and the family was a chosen family instead of like a by blood family, and what it did was I think it made it feel like it was 2016 instead of
The time frame.
the
You
time
have to be
frame.
careful of that because then you're not honoring the work. You're not honoring the authors.
But there was nothing in the script by Galati that said that everyone is blonde. And it really, we did everything by text. We hired a dramaturg who looked at the demographics of Oklahoma at that time and all those areas. And we hired actors whose nationalities would have been there at that time period. So it still was by the text. But it was also,
But the feeling was.
it felt modern because we haven't heard a black man as Tom Joad say those lines before. And so it became about, there's a scene about police brutality that spoken last summer felt very contemporary,
Like
but we
Black Lives
didn't
Matter.
change any of the text. But the actors playing that scene felt it in a very different present way. So that's an example of like how it was classic, but it felt very now, in a good way, I think. But yeah.
So as you know, Court Theater recently did Waiting for Godot, black cast. Is there a difference between that and having white actors do August Wilson?
Yes.
Okay. You want to think about it?
We did.
Go ahead.
Oh, was that pretty quick? Well, we sort of touched on it just a little bit
Sure.
because you brought it up when we were chatting. I think Godot is very different. Again, there's not a character description that says these guys are a certain ethnicity. These guys are, you know what I mean? It's like, that's not there, you know. With August, it's very different. It's very mapped out. It's very clear. It's very ethnic specific. It's, you know, the information, you know, would you say?
Yeah, he often dictates not only what race the people are, but what race the directors of his plays are. He is very, very specific about how his plays are done.
Very
And
hands-on.
actually, a lot of minority playwrights are, and it's theater's responsibility to really look at the author's intent. Often they have like disclaimers of this needs to be done with this cast, this kind of cast. When theaters veer away from that, that's when it gets really dicey, and there really isn't I don't think a good reason for that to happen if an author had that intent.
There was a case at Kent State University where they did the mountaintop and they
Oh, yeah.
cast the guy as
Martin Luther
Caucasian.
King.
Come on, that's
He was white.
you know, that just makes the text something totally different, you know, and then it's anyway.
You know, there are other examples where if you just have to be respectful of the playwright, it's their piece. And it's the story that they're telling. And if they're trying to honor a community that is not even represented nearly enough, then why would you take opportunities away from that? And why would you take their story away from that community and that story away from that playwright? It's irresponsible. And that's not the same thing as Godot, which wasn't written to honor white people. Godot is about ideas, and you have to honor the story. And to cast August Wilson with white people is not honoring the story. And that's everyone, every designer, every director, every actor, every casting person's job is to honor the story.
Absolutely.
I sort of knew the answer, but.
But it's good to ask.
you
It's
just
good to ask.
yeah.
And, you know, before we were talking about award ceremonies, whether it's the Emmys, the Oscars, the Tonys, the Jeff Awards, etc. So, honoring actors who identify as he or she is one situation. Those identifying as they, how do these organizations address that?
Do you?
So I don't actually think that the Tonys have addressed this yet, and it partially, and I don't know for sure, it might be because they haven't nominated anyone who would qualify for that. In Chicago, we're gonna have a lot of opportunities to do that, and so I think there are a few. I thought about this because actually I'm friends with Sid Germain, who was in Matchmaker, who sometimes went by they, and it might be different now. Sid played a female character in The Matchmaker, I think. But I think for a different award, I can't remember what Chicago award, I think it was online, was nominated for Puck, for Folio, and I think was nominated under Best Actor, and Sid was upset because there wasn't a precedent, right? But it was also an assumption, and it goes back to what I was talking about before, where not everyone goes by he, and Puck is actually also like just you don't even know what Puck is, right?
Well, Puck is like a nymph.
Right,
you know, so
right. And so, it is, and it is again, like for all of us, in the most generous of spirit, this is new territory for so many. So when Sid brought this up, a lot of us in the community were thinking like, what would you do? What would the options be? One option, which I don't see happening, is to do away with Best Actor and Best Actress and just have Best Performer, in drama, comedy, whatever, which, I mean, would be its own thing, and I think some people would prefer it and some people would not prefer it, so that is one option. Another option is to have, when it is appropriate, Best Performer, Best Trans Performer in whatever, in a play or musical. But then what that gets into is some people just want to be seen as female.
Right.
Some
Right.
people just want to be seen as male. But then how do you know? So then the other option is when this opportunity comes up, that the committee or the awards, you just ask the person, and how do you want to be identified?
Exactly. I think
Because
that's-
it's gonna be different with every single person you talk to. And you know what Delia says is not gonna be the same as what Sid says, which is not gonna be the same as what Malik says. It's like, it's not, they're all gonna have a different answer and a different way of identifying, so it's kind of hard to anticipate what that's going to be, so.
Did you say something about film before we were talking?
About-
About film goes on with awards or not?
in terms of
Of this?
Plans.
Well, I mean, Orange is the New Black. I mean, you've got the character that is a transgender, but I don't think it was an issue. I think because it was like Best Actress.
And, because that's how she
right,
identifies.
she identifies,
Right.
so it was not,
Right,
it was not a problem.
right, because
So-
she goes as she.
Right.
But
But
it
it
will
could-
not be the same
yeah,
for every
right.
single person.
And I think you're right. I think it's just ask.
Right.
How do you want to be represented?
Yeah.
We want to honor you because you are amazing. So
Mhm.
how do we give you this award? I think
And
it's a
that's the
case by
most
case
respectful,
basis.
yeah.
Well, thank you. I think we'll open up to questions. I'm sure some people have some. George?
Okay, you get an assignment, you become familiar with the play, you confer with the director, and you call in from what? A pool of people that you know personally? Or people who have, auditioned for you at some point?
Well,
How do you acquire your pool of people that you get called in?
it's some of what you said. It's people that we know.
Okay.
First and foremost, it's people that the artistic director or the director knows, because that's part of, who's on your wish list? Who do you want to bring in? So it's a combination of that, and then people that we know, and that people that none of us know. Do you know what I mean?
Do you
So
ever have auditions for yourself?
Often, yeah. It depends on, because you cast from out of town too sometimes, so.
yeah, I mean, if I'm doing a play, it's different than a film, very different than a film, and it's a different process, and it takes usually a little bit longer. Film is quick. It's just like bam, bam, it's over. Like what? But with theater, it's different. I mean, because you've got people coming in doing their monologues, and then the director has to see them. Sometimes the artistic director has to see them. There is a first look, and then they have to come back for a callback, and then they have to come back to read with people, and it's a process. It's a real process. So it's not just, unless someone is already attached. You want to explain what
Yeah.
attached is?
So you know, there are a lot of theater companies in Chicago that have ensembles, and when they're choosing their seasons, they're choosing it in part to like include these actors in their dream roles or roles that the artistic director wants to see them in, and then based on that, the casting director says, okay, well, if this person is playing the lead, who makes sense opposite this person, and then it's a trickle down effect of the ensemble that will support the person attached to the project.
When an actor new to Chicago come to you and say, put me on your list?
Yeah,
I'd like to
absolutely.
do something for you, or
If-
I want to play the title role in Waiting for Godot.
The very smart actors are doing their research, and the moment that theaters announce their season, they figure out, can I see myself in that play? I'm going to email the casting people,
That's it.
if there's that casting director or there's an artistic director, if there's not a casting person, and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I love this play, this role speaks to me, please accept my headshot and resume and consider me for this project or anything else you have in mind. And that what that does for us is it makes us think, this is somebody who's smart, they're paying attention to what we're doing, and they already know the play well enough to know the role and whether or not they're great for that role, they're already on a level that is above the other actors who didn't do their research.
And have the nerve to do a humble greeting.
Absolutely.
No, but that's their brand.
It's huge. Yeah.
That you have to build your brand as an actor. You know what I mean?
That's part of your job.
Yes, every day that you get up and you look in that mirror, you see you. And so you are constantly building that brand. So it is your responsibility, which they don't always teach in school.
No, they don't.
That you have to, who else is going to promote you?
But that-
Everybody can't afford,
Right.
to get an agent. Everybody can't get an agent. So you have to do your due diligence. And even if you have an agent, the agent works for you. You don't work for the agent. People get that twisted all the time, because they get afraid of the agent. Well, my agent said, and I said, well, wait a minute, who's
That's
working
your
for
business
who?
partner.
Okay,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you should have a hand in guiding where your career is going. But it is a brand, make no mistake. It is a job, 24/7, 365.
I will say, going back on what you said, actors also have to see themselves in the roles. And this, I hate to harp on the non-traditional thing, but clearly that's my agenda. Why diversity in casting and in plays is so important, and proper representation on stages is so important, especially in a city like Chicago, is that there are young actors going to school and looking at plays, and if they don't see themselves on stage, then they won't submit themselves for just the kid who's the boyfriend, because they never see somebody who looks like them in that role. So they're only going to submit themselves for the terrorist, or it's really, really important for the new school of actors, the new young actors, to know that the stage is also for them, and all of these stories are theirs to be told.
Thank you.
And that's why you might have some, just to piggyback on that,
Yeah.
some artistic directors say, I can't find any good black actors. I can't find any good Asian actors. Why is that? Do you know what I mean? And you
Yes.
just explained it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a large part of it.
And a big part of our job, this is still on your
Yeah.
question, is we have been watching plays all throughout, or looking on Facebook, in addition to checking our emails and seeing the actors who have sent us those letters, because we are looking to expand our repertoire of people that we know.
Going to showcases. I'm a member of the Illinois Theater Association, the ITAs, and they do a huge audition, so that's one way for us to see new actors that come in, you know what I mean? So it's our job to go to showcases and shows and high school things and August Wilson monologue, because you don't know who's going to pop out of that, and it's just there, you just don't know. Church basement plays, you don't know.
Come on, and then Susan. You had your hand up, right? Yeah.
Thank you for coming and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. I just wanted to go back to clarify one of the comments about diversity. When you talk about how people classify themselves, is that a position of the person or of the show itself? Because it would seem to me that what they call them in the show is what the classification for an award would be, irrespective of what the person calls themselves.
little tricky, because you wanna,
Can you say that? Sorry, say that one more time.
Well,
Sorry.
if you have a transgender character playing a woman in a play, if the play calls it a woman,
Uh-huh.
then it doesn't matter what the transgender person calls itself, if that's the description in the play.
But that's the
That's being-
character.
that's being- Right,
But
but
the-
but it's the character, and that's why I'm asking the question.
Right.
Because I think it's the character that's being awarded,
Right.
and not the individual, and what they think about themselves, right?
But it says best actor and best actress, not best character. And so that's where it gets dicey, is because you're honoring the actor who brought that role to life. And so I think that's why you have to go by what the person who played the role prefers. I understand what you're saying, but I think that's why.
If the character's a tree, what do you do?
No, but just say transparent.
yeah.
He's best actor.
But exactly.
And he's playing a
A
woman.
woman,
Right.
yes.
All right, Susan, then comes Doreen.
Just quickies, Emjoy, I've seen you act, does this mean, and you're wonderful, does this mean you don't get to do it again?
That's so nice. I'm starting rehearsals at court next week, and I just completed a show at Hypocrites. So I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to do both.
Okay.
But thank you. That's
Do you
nice.
sit in on auditions ever, or not your territory? Would you sit in on auditions for people that you propose? with the-
Yes, that's
With
a
the director and the artistic director?
sitting in on auditions is huge.
Have we come back to the casting?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay.
Yeah, don't you think it's huge. It would be weird if we didn't watch
Yeah,
the audition.
we have to.
And all the callbacks and all?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, they
because
want us there.
directors
Oh,
need
yeah.
also our input, because we
Okay.
might have information that they don't have because they're just basing it off of what they just
Right,
saw.
and they totally trust what we're
So they
saying.
would call you, or they would call their agent for feedback?
Oh, no, they never call the
No,
agent.
we call
Yeah.
the agent if we
Mhm.
want feedback.
That's,
Uh-huh.
okay.
We gather information, the director makes the final decision.
Mhm.
No, that I understand.
Yeah.
Oh, so you give the feedback to the agent then?
Right, if they ask for it,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, yes,
Right.
yes,
Okay.
Yeah,
I
if
understand.
they ask for it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Doreen?
Yeah, I'm sorry to go back to
Yeah.
the trans situation, because it has come to us, one or two directors have asked us to look into this and make a determination. Now, if you're thinking that here we are as judges, we're looking at excellence in theatre, we look in the program and we see the name of the actor playing so-and-so part is this. We're going to then define it by male or female according to the name in that program. So, how are we now going to start thinking about, is it a male playing a female playing a male? I mean, getting that kind of situation is a bit difficult. We can only look at what we see, the appropriateness and the excellence with which that actor performs, but we have to know who's performing.
Mhm.
So is it a male or female? Is it an actor or an actress to whom we are giving an award? So we need the name
Right.
in the program.
Right.
That's the definition for us.
Sure.
Mhm.
We can't think about all the other things that come in between.
Sure.
It's a difficult situation
Mhm.
otherwise.
Sure, but then, maybe it's someone on the committee's job to just fact check and ask the theater, are these pronouns correct? And maybe it's just like, it's an extra step that we might all have to have for the next couple years because it's new. And it's a little bit more work, but it's not a lot of work. It just might be that one extra thing.
Yes.
You talked about the time after the casting is done when you cross your hands and feet and pray it all works. Do you do something like, I don't want to say counseling or instructing or giving a history of what this theater is like that the actor is going into, or even what these people are like that the actor is going to be working with?
Absolutely, absolutely, that's part of the pitch. When you mean when I'm talking to an actor about, okay, and they're asking me about, okay, the theater, and first of all, Google is your best friend. So if you are auditioning for something, you better know what you're auditioning for. I mean, there is no excuse now
To not
say,
know what
well,
you're walking into.
You know, and I run into that a lot in Los Angeles because there's a thing called Actors Access where they can just hit a button and just apply for things. And they don't remember what they're applying for. So I have my assistants call. Hi, this is Omar calling from TMS Casting, and you submitted 2 days ago for the role of blah 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 in this film about turtles or whatever. And then they're like, oh, what play was that? What movie was that? And I have a hard time with that one, because again, you have to be responsible as an artist. You have to know. I haven't run into that in Chicago. People are pretty much so on it, and with theater, they know. I know I applied for this. I know this is what this is what it's about. So tell me a little bit more about the casting director now, or I mean about the director.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that I should do? But they should really know, who they're auditioning for. For example, I didn't know this lovely young lady went beforehand, and then this great man said, "We're gonna sit on a panel," and I'm like, I don't know who I'm sitting next to, So I immediately Google's my best friend, and I look up her information so that I can have an intelligent conversation with her, and not just sit there and stare at her, and go, well, I don't really know anything about you. So it's, I don't know if that's answering your question, but we help them to. It's a win-win. We want
them to get the
Right.
job.
You to get the
so
job.
we want them to be prepared.
Yeah, we
Well,
want you to be prepared.
Your research worked out very well because you're great together.
I don't know.
Judith and Becker.
Yeah. I was back in the moment when you said you'd completed your transgender casting and your non-traditional casting, and you were holding your breath, hoping it was going to work. Can you tell me any time it didn't work and why?
In casting in general, or with.
Well, any individual situation. I mean, I think we're a group
If
here.
it's a Chicago
we
show,
s-
don't mention which one it is.
We
Sure.
see a lot, an awful lot of plays, and I'm sure everybody has had the experience where they've seen it and said, that was great, that was really interesting. And other times they say, oh, there's maybe some inappropriate style mix because these people didn't have experience in working, say, in a more traditional play, and they sort of bring a whole social and ethnic mix into it, which kind of jars. I don't know.
I can think of something. I'm from Seattle originally.
Yes.
And the big musical theater there is Fifth Avenue Theater, and they have a really great national reputation. They did Oklahoma, and the chorus was pretty diverse. All the leads were white, except for Judd.
Oh, God.
Ooh.
That's a problem. That's a statement.
Yeah.
And the guy was great. He had a wonderful voice. You can't take that away from him. He was wonderful. What that said to the audience, and what I didn't actually, I only saw clips of it, but just seeing a trailer, it's jarring. It's like you said, it's horrifying because Judd is maybe one of the worst villains in musical theater. And when he's abducting young white blonde Lori, and the show is being done in 2014, what is the statement that you're trying to make about the one black lead that you have in the play? It's problematic. Now, if Curly was also black and Lori was, then it becomes less problematic. But that was an instance where maybe it was the best person for the job, but you have to think big picture a lot of the times. You can't just give the one minority who shows up to your auditions, you can't just give that the Latina, the slut character. You can't do that because you have to think about what that says. You can't give the sexual object to the one minority that comes in. You can't do that. It's tokenism, and it's a scary thing to do right now in this climate. And you just that was a major problem.
Thank you. I can't see who it is, but up here.
Hi.
Oh, Jim, okay.
I know these things are getting complex, and we're giving these things more thought than we ever before. I'm curious how you felt about the dust up at Porchlight within the Heights, because there, as I understood it, people who cast that show cast who they thought they had the best person for the role, and they didn't ask him. I mean, like you said, you have limitations as to the questions you can ask, but then there was this, this big question about it.
Well, if you want to talk about the issue as opposed to the specifics.
Sure.
Because
I
we
go
judge
back
the
to
show.
what we were saying before about author's intent. In the libretto, the librettist stated that it was important to her that the actors portraying these characters be of Latin descent, and that's author's intent. And in general, you should try to honor the author's intent.
So should that actor have been fired when it became known that he wasn't actually?
It gets dicey because again, we're in new territory. Like when I was coming up as an actor, I was told to audition for anything that I could pass for because we just need jobs, right? So this is a new day, and learning how to be responsible as theater companies, as artists, as casting administrators, it's all new territory. But if everybody goes back to honoring author's intent and story, I think a lot of good things can come from that.
Nick, was your hand up? I can't tell.
I was just
Oh.
curious, sort of the opposite of an earlier question, if you had specific instances of where you felt really proud of, like maybe an actor who was not the first person to the director's mind that you convinced them to take in it, or your favorite particular casting story.
Only if it's more than a year ago.
Let me
'Cause
back
we still,
something
'cause
up.
we still judge, so that's
Oh,
why I
sure,
asked.
sure.
Well, I'm not gonna even talk.
Okay.
He said something before we even get to the convinced.
Mm-hmm.
What? Convince the director? I think they already come with, we don't really convince. We just present.
We do
You know,
pitch.
And we do pitch. But, I mean, at the end of the day, he or she really has his or her mind pretty much so on what it is that they want. We have to be really good at, because convincing says something totally different than pitching. Do you know what I mean? That means you need to change your mind, because you don't, so. But then what was the other part of your question? Because I just got stuck on the convincing.
A story of a success story of somebody who was unexpectedly cast. Is that a?
I've had that. I have had that, where you have a young actor come out, and I won't say what the play is, and they just were like a diamond in the rough, and they just blew the artistic director away. And it's just like I had no idea that they were, because they were finally in their yeah,
Yeah.
they were finally in their ilk. They were finally doing their thing, and then they just blossomed,
That was Denzel.
So yes, and that's always, and at that point we're breathing really well. We're not holding our breath, and we're like, yes.
Because they're where they're supposed to be.
Right, and
Yeah.
we help to bring them there.
Yeah.
And sometimes if the director was a little like, I'm not really sure, then we just, instead of convincing, it's like, no, really seriously, this kid, he or she, they got it, they do. Because there's a lot riding on a show, right? There's money, there's, are people gonna come out and see it? There's a lot riding on it, so, it's.
Well, breathing well is a good way to end, I think. So let's thank our panel for coming. We'll take 3 to court.
Uh-huh.
Oh, but,